how does that work for, like, do your programs pay for it? Does your district pay for it? Does your coordinator offer? Do you ask to go? Is there union money that you can go at? Like, how do you go, and how does it get paid for? Or do you just do it? I want to go, I'll pay for it. That's my question on how that works for other districts, other parent ed.
Is my mic working now? Okay, great. My program was going to pay for us to attend, but unfortunately, we found out that it conflicts with the staff meeting where we're doing like planning for next year. So I'm feeling bummed out that I can't go. But my coordinator was like, yeah, that sounds valuable. We'll pay for it.
Hopkins has done something really great that we actually don't have classes for those 2 days. And that has been really nice. And then they pay for all of us to go, well, for the actual registration fee, but not for the hotel or anything like that. But they'll pay for the registration fee. And we don't have to worry about getting subs because we don't have classes, which is really nice. And no, I don't know how they got that passed through. I have no idea. Just a really supportive coordinator, I think, is what it came down to.
We have meetings scheduled all during that time that are mandatory. So at the school district, the kids are not there, but we're supposed to be there. So.
So do a lot of you in general pay out of your pockets for professional development? No. So if there was something outside of Menafee, like if there was it's the behavior and mental health, the Minnesota Mental Health Association. So let's say they were doing a conference, or like NCFR is in November, and there's a full session rate, and then there's like a single day rate. So if you wanted to go to one of those professional conferences, or there was a webinar or something like that, would there be professional development funds that you could apply to for that? Or is it like you have one thing, you can go to that, and then besides that, you're on your own? How does it work?
Pay out of pocket.
Out of pocket?
Unless it is professional development offered through the school district and usually mandatory. Although they have offered a couple of classes in the summers that were paid for, that were at our building. We have a staff member who works for MDE and Metro State and us, and she's offered a few classes, and those have been free for us to get the credit, but we were not paid for the time. So, and anything else we go to is on our own dime.
We have a process in Hopkins where we've got a pool of money, and together as a staff, if you decide you want to go to professional development, whatever, you write up a quick little blurb and then it goes around to everybody, and they either approve or deny. Almost always it's approved if we have money. So, and we try and make it so it's equal across the board as much as we possibly can, but it's a kind of a group decision.
Shannon, is that through the union or through the staffing?
Oh, that's a really good question. It might be written into the contract as union. I believe so, just because there's some decision-making agreement around it. But however much money we get, like the process is probably union driven, but the money is then dependent on the program itself, how much they can allocate.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing. I was just curious, you know, back when Sue Stoner was here, we just got to go because she was, but yeah, so that's since changed. And I was just curious how it worked for other people. And I know it's hard. I think that's fabulous that you just have the day off for these important conferences so people can go, because that's always the issue, right? But okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks, Carissa.
Krista,
Well-
it's Ellen. Hey, it's worth asking. If Menafee was not, we didn't get it off. And so we started asking for it. If no one has ever asked for it to be off, then, you know, they would never think about it. But it is impossible to find subs for your staff when you're gone those 2 days. And so if you just work it into your whole schedule. So I would just start asking for it and ask for it every year. If the squeaky wheel gets the grease, you know? So give it a shot. That's what I did. And now it's off every year and it's wonderful.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we do have union money, so I haven't done that before. I don't really, I guess I don't know if I didn't know about it or if it's new or what. So I'm gonna try that this year to apply for that, or hopefully this fall one. I don't know if I can do it fast enough, but the spring one too. So we'll see.
So last week, when we left off, we had begun a very important and interesting conversation about, how should we put it, Ellen? I hate to use the word challenging. I guess it's challenging because, I mean, you always have, you know, that learner, that student who says something surprising, right? Who it could be completely out of left field. It could be a 180 from the flow of your conversation. Sometimes, and we all know Ellen's dad, who is and has been challenging. Yeah. And so we know sometimes people will say things as a power move, right? Out of their own insecurity or their need for whatever. So there's a full range of sort of motivations behind things. And one thing that we are rarely prepared for is how to handle those. I've always sworn I used to do some improv and taken some improvisation workshops. And I always swore like everybody should take improv, right? Just to be able to think on your feet, because that's what we always do, right? Something inevitably happens that we need to punt, we need to handle, we need to respond to, and especially while we are facilitating the group dynamic, you know, and somebody says something for whatever reason that no one is expecting, or maybe you start to expect it, like with Ellen's dad, and so you're prepared for it, but again, you don't want to over focus on one individual because your focus is for the entire group. So
You also don't want to make that person feel stupid. You don't want to
Right.
make them feel stupid in the moment.
right.
Like I had a dad once be like, someone's like, oh, my child bit me. How do I deal with that? And another dad's like, you bite him back. And I was like, oh my God, no. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have to not respond. You have to show your poker face. You need to not make that person who said that feel stupid, because if they said it, they clearly think it's okay. And then you need to protect the group from thinking, oh yeah, great, I'll bite my child back. And then you need to teach the alternative best practice. And you need to do it all in about a 15-second time span. It's really special how it's so fast.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, Ellen, because that brings up that while we're doing it, it's also that dynamic of understanding the other person and not wanting to put them on the spot or disrespect them, because we can't play psychologist in that moment and try to second guess their own motivation. We just have to, you know, handle it, because also our reaction to that person sends a message to the rest of the group, right? About what happens if they say something off-putting, or they say something, are we going to react, or are other people going to react that it's stupid or that it's wrong or something like that, which is just the antithesis of what we're going for. So yeah, so that's just simply what we wanted to talk more about was, have you had those experiences? How have you handled them? What can the group help you with going forward to be able to respond, or yeah, so Ellen, do you want to give any more background or anything more about sort of what launched the topic last week?
Well, my dad, right? We were talking about, potty and accidents and things like that. And he responded by saying that when their daughter had a poop accident, they made her clean it up. And, on one hand, like, yeah, you had a poop accident, but asking a 3.5-year-old child to clean poop out of underwear, that's disgusting. It's not appropriate. And if a child is freaked out by an accident, cleaning poop out of underwear is not going to fix the problem. It's going to make it worse, because and I had just said, yep, for some kids that they'll see that as a punishment, because if they had the accident, they're already feeling bad about the accident. It didn't feel good. And now they're being asked to continue to be, handling the poop. And he was like, it's not a punishment. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to get in an argument. So I dropped it. But yeah, that's what precipitated this question.
Mhm.
And just for some context, Ellen has a longstanding relationship with this dad. And that's, I think, also very important in this consideration is sort of the length or degree of your own relationship with the individual.
Dread when those things happen in class. I just dread it. So I get, yeah, it's so incredibly hard. And in the moment, all the different things you have to be thinking about to address it well. Sometimes I try and unpack it by saying, so, how did that work for you? Although that can backfire too, because you hope something will come up and they'll be like, well, she tried to clean the poop, but then it got all over the bathroom, and then it happened like this, and then it was a great big mess and it caused me more work. And then that gives you that option to say, so did it accomplish what you were hoping it would accomplish? Or, would you consider doing something different next time? Or something along those lines to kind of help get them there. But there's always the danger that it'll be like, yes, it worked so well, and I would absolutely do it again. And then you're like, shoot, I just reinforced something I don't want to reinforce. So, yeah, so hard.
I think an added issue then is, do you or do you not engage other people in the class at that point? Right? Because sometimes, my motivation at times like that is to diffuse and find a way to kind of level things out and to be able to move on. And I guess it depends on, what the thing is, but to continue the conversation about it, to open it up to other people, so what does the group think? Or, so what has your practice been in times like that? But like you were saying, Shannon, sometimes that can backfire.
And luckily, depending on the group, sometimes I can be like, oh, yep. What have I kind of ignore it, and I'm like, what have others of you done when your child's had a poop accident? And usually the group is great, and they're like, I just say, whoops, try again next time. So I just kind of hope that another parent will give a different alternate thing. But sometimes you're in a group of parents who've never done this before, and nobody has anything. So that's another way. You just have to know your group and be able to bounce it off other people and hope they have a better response.
Well, is this a first child?
Yes.
So I wonder if they didn't anticipate that it would end up being a bigger mess or something like that. And I wonder if the parent is also freaked out by seeing poop in underwear, because my bias would be, oh, I might ask them to help me clean it up, but I'm certainly not going to leave them alone in the bathroom with a pair of pants full of poop. And, you know, because it strikes me as just, if we're punishing somebody, it's going to be me because there's going to be a terrible mess. And I wonder if that parent is, what do I want to say, uncomfortable enough about that, that they're putting it on their child, you know, rather than them interacting with it to like, oh, we had an accident. Okay, let's get it taken care of. And I'm also I'm kind of rigid in not supporting people who want to spend their whole early childhood life or their child's early childhood life doing potty training. All three of my children potty trained in a day. And it wasn't with M&Ms or anything like that. It was, they were ready and they wanted to do it. Now, one of them was 4.5, and I thought he was going to go to kindergarten using the, you know, in a pull-up. I honestly thought that, but he just didn't have time to stop and, you know, do that. So pull-ups were really a good thing. But once somebody in preschool caught sight of his pull-up in the bathroom, one of his classmates, and said, "You're not wearing a pull-up, are you?" And he said, pulled his pants up really fast and said, "No." And then he came home and started wearing, you know, big boy pants the whole time. So his genetically identical twin had trained in a day the year before, honestly, a year before, because he was willing to stop and do it. But I see parents spending, you know, like weekends without pants and, you know, all this effort and care into this. And I don't know, I think they must think it goes on your permanent record as a parent, what time you get your kids potty trained, because I'm just, and I say to parents, there's a whole lot of thoughts on this and you can do it however you want. My oldest was potty trained when he was in a childcare setting down the street with a friend. And they had a bunch of kids down there. And one day Sue called me and said, "Hey, I don't know if this matters to you, but I wanted you to know Jason's potty trained down here." I said, "That's great. That's wonderful." And they had taken some time to, you know, have scheduled potty breaks during the day. And I said, when he got home the next morning, when he was going to go back to Sue's, he said, I was switching him out of an evening diaper and into a new diaper. And he said, "I don't wear diapers anymore." And I said, "Well, that's cool." I said, sometimes it's we have kind of a busy morning. So how about every morning, because he was still wearing a diaper at night for a few months. How about every morning I ask you, is it a diaper day or a big boy pants day? And you decide then. And he said, well, it's a big boy pants day. And there were no more diaper days in the morning after that.
Mhm.
So when they're ready and they're motivated, you know, kid number 2 was not motivated until it became a matter of peer pressure. Peer pressure is a great thing sometimes with preschoolers, but
And that's my whole take, like my whole potty learning, and I've changed my talk to potty learning. I
mhm,
said, we're not training, like this is not a dog. And I said, you know, I say, do not compare your children to your other children. Do not compare your children to cousins. Do not compare your children to other friends. You can talk about learning to use the potty without them actually using the potty. They're learning how to use it without, anyway. So my whole take on it is, you follow your kids, you do what you want to do. Watch out for those books who are like, you can train your child in a day. No, you can't. If they're not ready, no amounts of bribes or treats or prizes sitting on the top shelf are going to make your child be able to control their bowels or their
and
bladder.
if you can, they were already ready.
Right, exactly. So that was the whole take of this day. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
so yeah, I'm so chill. I mean, they ask me all the time. So anyway, but that's my whole take on potty training. So that's why this comment was so, I was like, oh, no, this is the opposite.
Mhm.
But it doesn't just have to be about potty training. I mean, it wasn't even about the topic. It was just about, he just said something that I didn't want others to think, oh yeah, sure, I'm going to make my 2.5 or 3-year-old clean poop out of their pants, you know?
I wonder if there's a way to tie into the fact that the parent may be uncomfortable with that and feel
He's
the way that.
He's triggered by a lot of things. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Not
And-
at all. No.
And trying to ask if, how your child might have felt in that situation, probably a little like you would have. I mean, maybe there's a way to connect those and engender some compassion. Maybe.
I do use that now that you mention it, that, so how do you think your child was feeling, or reminding them of, let's put yourself in your child's shoes for a minute. Can you imagine, let's, think about cleaning up poop or cleaning up or being bitten by your parents. How would that feel to you as a kid? And sometimes that can be a little bit more like, oh, yeah, I don't want to be bitten. Why,
Mhm, mhm.
So, but it does, yeah, a parent has to be in a particular place where they're able to do that as
And-
well.
Yep. And
And
I
if they're not
guarantee
in that
you,
place,
he would have said, I don't care how she felt. She made a mess and she's going to clean it up. That would be a right on par answer for him. So that's why I didn't ask. It's like, I got him on his wavelength. Yeah. Anyway.
So one thing I'm thinking about, and I think it was Becca brought it up last week, and this has to do with parents and their cultures. And that I think she was talking about a Vietnamese parent who was talking about the practice in her culture that was different than the Western culture. And then maybe it was around food, or maybe it
It
was.
was spanking.
Spanking, yeah.
It was spanking.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
then within the culture, there was a very clear cutoff age, and then after that. And so, I mean, one of the things is that consideration of response, again, with that idea of being respectful, that it's different. And does it mean that it's wrong because it's different? And so I think that's the other real caution in asking that question about how does your child feel, or maybe even bringing it out to the whole group, because of the you don't want to also sound disrespectful to that parent's culture.
Mhm. I remember in a discussion in a mixed age group about that, a parent wanted to take me on by saying, well, we're Christians and we believe that the Bible says we should spank our children. Well, she didn't really know what else I do. And I explained that the staff that is used by the shepherd is for guiding. The crook was to drag the sheep back off the cliff so nobody went over and died. But they never beat the sheep with the shepherd's staff. That's not what it was for. So that was what the rod was for. And there's nothing in that source volume she was talking about that says beat your children. Yeah, it's guidance and teaching. Mhm. Mhm. So, and I'm sure I've said this before, but what I discovered, two things as a parent educator over a long time. One was different people mean different things by spanking. Some people mean swat on a diapered butt to get somebody's attention, and that doesn't freak me out too much if it happens occasionally. It may I'm sorry if that stance bothers you. Other people honestly mean quarter round about the head and shoulders. I mean, it's chargeable stuff. And knowing that people, my first question would be, what do you mean by spanking? What do you do? When do you do it? And my second question was always, do you have the relationship with the person who spanked you that you want to have with your child? I've never had anyone say yes yet. Because the line is always, well, I was spanked and I turned out okay. But it isn't what parents seem to want for their relationship with their child. for whatever help that might be.
Ellen, who is Mr. Chaz?
He's just a really great guy on Instagram. Yeah, he's a Black man and he talks a lot about breaking generational trauma. And he talks about how children are whole people and they're worthy. And he said, there's no reason for us just because we're bigger to exert force on them, but he words it so beautifully. He's really, really great.
Hmm.
But he talks, I mean, he does not he does not mince words. He is like, I am here to stop. Because I think he talked once about how, you know, Black children are typically abused more than white children. And so he's just really, I mean, just all children in general. He's like, we're going to work on this, but it feels it very deeply because I believe didn't he talk about how he was beaten pretty badly? I can't remember. I might be mixing him up with somebody else I follow, but I might be, you know, how sometimes they all meld together, but follow him, Mr. Chaz. He's wonderful.
His stuff is also really good because it's short and it usually is like a catchy tune. So if you have a way to show that during a lesson that it coincides with really nicely, it can be pretty powerful.
What is that, Naomi?
Just showing his stuff in class, if you
Oh,
can.
I mean, Mr. Chaz's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's super powerful and it's catchy. Like his songs that he uses with kids is super catchy.
Well, while we're on it, are there other ways that you handle the spanking issue? It remains a pretty significant thing. I mean, it's, you know, it's sort of anyway, I won't go into it, but I'm just curious. It's a sensitive issue sometimes, depending on the group.
I think too, you can roll with assuming that it's not the parents' hope to have to spank their children a lot, and talk about ways to guide and correct kids that don't require physical violence. I mean, it may be just bear hugging someone for a few moments and taking some deep breaths with them until everybody gets settled or reoriented.
Kids in the House has a video that talks about spanking. It's been a while since I've watched it, but I know that I embed it in my discussion about discipline, and we do have a slide and we talk about spanking, and I show that video. I think her message really is that it's a form, but it may not be the best form, and that the message that it sends to a child is not maybe kind of like Mary Kay saying, not quite what you're trying to get across to your child. So
I guess I just haven't had it come up as much. So I guess Naomi just said she did, but do others just like during discipline or some other topic just talk about it anyway? Or do you wait for it to come up, which I think everybody knows they're not supposed to. So even if they're spanking, they're probably not admitting it in a group of parents. So I'm just curious if you bring it up anyway, I guess.
I just talk about how sometimes you see red, and if you're seeing red, take yourself away from your child. Because I put it in the chat. I think for me, I know when I swatted my daughter on a diapered butt because she ran into the street, it was out of fear, right? It was and I felt powerless. And so I did it. And I think, you know, I said, if you're so angry that you want to hit something, and that includes your child, give yourself a break. There is nothing wrong with making sure your child is safe and going to a space where you can gather yourself. And I talk all the time. I spent almost 2 weeks on tantrums this week, and just meltdowns. And I said, you cannot stop a tantrum or a meltdown once it started. You got to ride it out, just like a storm. I said, and the best way to ride it out is for you to just chill. You can't stop it. You can't talk to them. You can't bribe them. They can't hear you anyway. And regulate yourself, because a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. And I've got that quote on my wall, and my parents take pictures of it. They love it. And so I tell them, put yourself in a timeout. So yourself, not the child, yourself. And so I think if parents do spank, I don't call it out. I'm like, anyone here spanked? But if they feel like they've done it out of anger, they're not going to admit it. But the fact that I'm like, you might feel so angry, you want to spank your child. I've like normalized that feeling, but then I give them tools to do something else. And that's how I cover it. And it never comes up.
You know, in some classes, I've also said, all of us who work in ECFE are mandated reporters. So if you tell me you're hitting your child regularly, I might be obligated to report that. However, if you tell me you're struggling with knowing what to do, we can talk. We can talk about all that. But Ellen, when you started to say, when you see red, I was thinking about like an early childhood professional who might see red on an arm or a leg and wonder, where did that come from? You know, and those are real questions. I also know that we need to have some compassion for the people, and I'm not suggesting anyone doesn't, but for those people who move to those options, there's a line that says, you know, the best part of parenting, or the highest goal of parenting, is to examine what your parents did, take what was good and use it, and take what was bad and forgive it. And when I heard some of my dad's experiences, as he was growing up from his older sister, I had a lot of compassion, because he had improved quite a bit over that.
I talk about that a lot. I talk about when your child is handed you in the hospital, you're also handed a parenting manual. And in it is, the only thing that's in it is how you were parented, and maybe how your siblings parented your nieces and nephews, and maybe how your friends have parented their kids. But there are going to be entire chapters you want to rip out and rewrite. And there are going to be chapters that you want to keep referring to, and you know you shouldn't, but it's easy because it's already there, and writing your own chapter is hard. And so I think commending them, and I talk all the time, like, a lot of what triggers you is what was shut down in yourself. And that is hard work, and nothing shines a light brighter on your childhood, what was squished down, than you're having your own kids. And I can't tell you how many times I've had parents be like, I thought I dealt with the trauma from my childhood. And I was like, yeah, I know you did. And guess what? Now you have a 3-year-old, and it's all going to come bubbling back up, and that's okay. But you have it's going to be hard work, but you can totally do it. So I just tell them I believe in them, and I commend them for when they try new things. And I feel like, and I once had a mom like, you're the only person who ever told me I was doing a good job. She said, because I had an alcoholic father and a narcissistic mother, and I could never go to them and be like, I had a bad day with my kid today. And I would always be like, you're doing the best you can, you know, and it's not a good day, and it's not going to be perfect. But yeah, parents have not made me cry very often. And when she left ECFE, I cried. I sobbed.
I'm kind of bringing up a tangential topic to this, but I've been really pondering this idea of our role as parent educators when we start to think about like boundaries, and especially with all the mental health needs we're seeing, when we start to talk about going into family of origin and what we're doing in our classes around some of this. Sometimes I feel like I'm right on that edge of, am I a therapist or am I a parent educator? And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I'm wondering if any of you are feeling some of that as well, and how you are dealing with that. Yeah, I do too.
I'm in particular teaching for the first time a class for blended families. And like day one, you know, and I kind of say this a little bit in all classes, but day one, especially in this class, I was like, okay, this is education and I'm an educator, and there's a lot of, you know, we're going to talk about emotions and hard things and we're going to cry. And I said that because, you know, one of the moms was crying. But I said, you know, I have to keep a real, you know, clear eye on that bright line between education and therapy, because it's, you know, I just tried to really lay it out clearly of kind of what this is and what this isn't. And I said, and I will often say, you know, hey, therapy is a great, you know, and try to connect you with resources. And all of these parents have said, you know, I'm in therapy, my partner's in therapy, my kids are in therapy. They've all kind of disclosed that. So, you know, that's one where I've really had to kind of think hard and keep that in the front of my mind about what this is and what this isn't and what I'm not trained for.
Well, and I think if we're trying to fix anyone, that we're orienting toward therapy. But I think if we're trying to educate about how kids are, for example, the stuff with separation, you know, I've said to classes now, everybody who was locked up in their house for 6 months and has been home with their children for the year and a half after that is probably going to experience separation anxiety, just like every baby who came into this classroom as a baby before the pandemic. And parents experience it and kids experience it, and it's normal and it's okay. You know, so that may feel therapeutic, but I think it's just talking about normal child development and how what we've experienced has affected us all.
So almost coming full circle, and this is something I think we've talked about before, but there are those parents, and I've had them as undergraduate learners as well, that are very obviously in need of therapy. I mean, just more from how they monopolize the conversation, right? That they are really needy and they really are milking. I mean, where the group setting is a wonderful setting for them because it's very supportive, right? But it moves beyond being supportive to being an outlet and being almost a substitute because it feels safe. Right. And because the parenting educator is a very welcoming presence and a very supportive presence. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's still remaining baggage about going to therapy, right? Or it could be a cost issue or whatever, right? And yet, in that attempt, you can start to see other families start to drift away because it's just like, oh, you know, he's talking again, she's talking again, right? And that poor parent educator who may not feel comfortable in that situation, cutting them off because they don't want them, the individual to feel unwanted or unneeded or uncared for, right? But at the same time, sort of lose the group. So again, sort of coming full circle, because that can be a challenging parent, right? Or somebody who says something from sort of, if anything, it's not left field because it's almost predicted. So how do you handle that kind of situation?
I had almost exactly that kind of scenario one last year. And it was actually the parent I kind of had known before COVID, but in that, and so I knew she had a lot of anxiety. She was very upfront about that, but just like getting a monologue going of dominating the conversation, that was really hard to kind of, you know, I kept trying to like, so has anybody, and so that was one, you know, and I felt so, you know, insecure about how am I going to talk to her? I need to pull her aside and have a one-on-one. And fortunately, one of my colleagues knows her too and kind of coached me a little bit of, you know, words to use. And I did a follow. Actually, I think I gave a phone call. I was like, boy, you seem to have a lot on your mind today. I've been thinking about you and reaching out. And I said, sounds like, you know, that I just came out with it. I'm like, it sounds like it would really be helpful for you to, you know, have a one-on-one talking with someone. Do you have anybody connected to? And I gave her, fortunately, in Minnetonka, we have a relationship with Relate Counseling. And so I was able to, you know, give that as an idea. And, you know, a few weeks later, she called me and she said, I just want to let you know, I had my first therapy session this morning. And I just feel, you know, like this is really going to be a good path for me. And it has been, but just, I've found, you know, from my friend who gave me that support of just being real matter of fact of, and because we have that relationship with Relate, I always have their flyers sitting right there. And I make a point, I send a follow-up email every week, and I make a point a couple times throughout the year of like, oh yeah, and there's also Relate, you know, in case a parent doesn't want to actually pick up the flyer. I email it to them just to kind of keep putting it out there and normalizing it.
That's a really good idea, Jennifer. I have a mom who has an older child with some significant mental health needs. I don't know if we've got bipolar brewing, you know, and too early to diagnose or EBD or what, but we were talking about tantrums, and like I showed a video of a dad sitting and letting his daughter he was just compassionately present, and she started to cry. And she was like, yeah, I can do this with one child and I can't do it with the other child. And I know I'm not supposed to talk about that other child because I'm always like, we're focusing on the kids here. But she's sitting there and she's sobbing, right? She doesn't like to talk. She doesn't have any friends. She's in therapy. Her son is in therapy, but she still like brings down the group, you know, and I'll go up to her after class and she's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Like she won't talk about it. So maybe I'll give her a phone call. Because she doesn't want to talk, but I don't know. It's just so hard. I mean, she has needs, but they're clearly not being met. And she's pregnant. So it's like, oh God. So thank you for that idea. I never thought to do a phone call, or maybe I'll text her. I don't know, just so she can vent.
Yeah. And my colleague, you know, she's a phone call kind of person. Just gonna give him a quick phone call, and which is so not me. I just want to like send him an email or something. It feels like I've got to really be brave to make a phone call. But you know, and 99% of the time you just leave a voicemail because nobody picks up their phone. But I found it really helpful. Just that super quick phone call, and I used Sarah's words of, you know, I was just really thinking about you. I just want to let you know I was really you're on my mind, and I, you know, and maybe I'll say another sentence or something. And so I've been trying to use that more.
Mary Kay? I just have to imagine, you know, like you've had parents that you've reached out to. I mean, for you, because of your dual role, is it even harder for you to separate?
I do not have a dual role when I'm in the building.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher, period. I don't have a life outside the building other than being married and having children. It's not allowed to talk about or to refer to or anything else. And in fact, when I allowed someone in a class a few weeks ago to talk about their own faith tradition, somebody took offense and I was reprimanded. So asked not to allow that to happen anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that would have been the same response if it had come up in somebody else's class. So, and I can't worry about it.
Yeah, but even without, but a lot of times what I'll hear from you is your pastoral, your counseling background, even without labeling it or naming it, right? Come into how skillfully and artfully you are there for parents.
Well, I think, I come in with some assumptions that are not necessarily faith or education, but kind of life. And one is hurt people hurt people. One is I look at everyone, even all of you, as being a beloved child of God. I wouldn't say that in ECFE, but, and so if somebody is hurtful, I always wonder what might have happened to them. How did they become that way? Because people who are loved well, don't carry as much baggage as others. I think everybody has some. So I try to be really curious about those kind of things, and I might be curious in a call or in person or, on the walking. I may choose to walk a family out to the parking lot just because I, mentioned that I'm going for a walk anyway, and maybe I wasn't, but maybe I'm making that part up. And or a parent who's got 3 littles who are in motion, like not one in a stroller, but 3 moving on their own. And I'll just say, hey, can I offer a hand? Would that be helpful? And usually they're very thankful, and I just might ask them, like, it sounds like you've had a really tough week. If you want to talk more about it, or if there's anything we as a class can do, let me know. And, my job is to be prepared with responsible, appropriate resources that can be, that are, what I want to say, evidence-based. And I have some of those, and I can look for others, and, but I also have done some of the things that just come from being old and having done this a long time. I had one dad who made the mistake of giving his keys to his toddler on the way out the door to quiet them when they were, I don't know what kind of noise they were making, and then didn't want to give the keys back. And I actually was carrying a small toy that was not an ECFE toy, but that was my belonging in my pocket. And I knelt down and I said, hey, could I trade you this car for those keys? Well, that was simple. And the dad smiled and he said, you cheat. And I said, yeah, and when you learn more, you'll cheat too. So, we learn things, we learn tricks. We learn how to, I sing when somebody's in distress, and sometimes I'm singing to myself. But it seems to calm people around me, especially in a trauma situation. And last week we went out for a evacuation a drill, and we got to kind of coach the parents as we go in that we're not going to go to our children. They're going to go out from where they are, from the gym, and we're going to go out from where we are in the fastest way possible to get outside. And we have a meetup place, so please come with me and don't worry about where your kids are. And so, but we had to wait out there 5 or 6 minutes while we made sure everyone was out of the building so we could check the time. And one little guy decided to kind of play with one of the teachers and kind of run away a little ways. And we're adjacent to the grounds of an elder care place. And so he took off into their yard, and which is fine. They don't worry about that. But we were concerned that, and the teacher was trying to coach him back, and she didn't want to necessarily play because she didn't want to leave the other kids. And she also didn't want to taunt him to run farther. And as he edged toward the street, I just joined the thing and came around from the side and, and convinced him to go back toward her. And mostly convinced him because I was physically, this way, like making a fence. And I asked her later and I said, I could see that you were trying to talk him back, and I really appreciate that. but I was concerned that he would get too close to the road, and she goes, no, that was perfect. She said, if there were two of me, that's exactly what I would have done. So, you know, we try and partner and do the best we can to support each other in all, whatever the challenges are. So I don't know if that helpful.
Well, you've made me feel better about being old.
You know, it's not something we can change. So we got to use it to the best of our ability. And one of my twins and his partner and their 3 kids moved from one apartment to another at the beginning of September. And we didn't have a moving truck because we're only moving across the parking lot. But they had to move like bunk beds and big consoles and all sorts of stuff. And my job was I was at the first apartment, making sure the kids were out of the way and didn't get hurt and the movers could get what they wanted to, which was like my family and some of their friends. And then my second job was, at one point, we all moved over to the new place. And then I'm like, my husband said, Tetrising what's there so that people can get through and other people can't get out. And, you know, and you do what you need to do. And hopefully we have a little wisdom we carry, and all of us have skills, all of us have abilities, and they're different. And so as best we can, we share them. So it was a really fun and challenging 2 or 3 days, but we got them moved, and the bunk beds had to come apart to come out of that room because they built them in the room. So that makes sense. And yeah, they're all moved in and they're having a good time, and there's a little tiny yard to play in. So
one of the things that I am super grateful about this group is that we have such a blend of years of experience and talents and abilities. And I think of Jenny coming into being a parenting educator with her years and years and years in maybe just years and years in Montessori, you know, and the different places that people live, and our experiences as parents, sometimes as grandparents, as nieces and aunts, and all of those things as members of our communities, of the connections that you have in your communities that you bring in. I think it's just the diversity of this group that is just every week is so such a great combination, regardless of who's here, you know, that I think really lends a lot. Thanks, everyone. Well, we have a couple minutes left. Anything else? This has been a great conversation. I appreciate your forbearance I started the recording as soon as we started because I knew the topic we were getting into, and the hits on YouTube just keep on coming. So they're the videos are always watched. So and I knew that this topic would be very interesting. So thanks to Ellen for bringing that up last week, for you being you and having the needs that you do. Yeah, so yeah, anything else before we sign off? No.
Just curious, are you taking a break next week because of MEA? I probably won't be here, but I'm just wondering if I'm missing it or not.
I think I'll be in meetings all day, so.
You could leave it open. People who like work every Friday at noon may be like, oh, I'll hop on. So, I mean, you can just leave it open for anybody who's around.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, with that, then we'll miss whoever is at MEA next week. And welcome whoever is here. And if I'm by myself, I'll just have the best conversation. So, all right, everyone, take care. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
You'll only be by yourself,
Bye.
Susan.